Are you having problems with gluing your drums?
I can't do this!
And they sound like this. Then you're in the right place because we're gonna take those drums and turn into this. And there is one trick that really makes everything glued together. And if you get it, you will never have a problem with gluing your drums again. Enough with the talk, let's jump in. Dynamic range refers to the difference between the loudest and quietest part of a sound. A high dynamic range means there's a large volume difference between the loud and soft sections, while a low dynamic range means the opposite. Dynamics describe how a sound's volume changes over time. A transient sound has a rapid volume changes, think of a snare drum hit, while a sustained sound changes more gradually, like a cymbal ring. I'm oversimplifying, but a non-glued drums would look like this. Each sound has different peaks and different time behavior. On the contrary, a glued drums would look like this. There are still volume and time variation, but they look a bit more coherent. We will start with unbalanced drums, and I want you to try to figure out why this sounds so unglued. These are just drum samples that I use from Splice, but that is not the real problem here. The real problem is actually the volumes are not making sense. I'm going to take off the kick because the kick is most of the time considered a bass element in electronic dance music. We have a super big dynamic range between loudest and quietest part of the elements, and we have this super transient sounds with super sustained or sausage sound. So two problems at the same time. Way too many difference between the volume levels plus way different transient behavior makes the drums super unglued all over. Now, can you fix this? Probably, but the better way to solve this problem actually is starting from the scratch, picking the right samples. Let's take the same pattern, switch the samples and play this. Everything sounds much close to each other. You can visually see the shapes are more similar to each other, but there are other things that we can do. So the snare. One of the common way of gluing drums actually clipping or compressing them, giving them similar shapes and also giving them a bit more body. In this case here, what I'm going to do first, clip that initial transient, so a bit more sausagey but still transient snare here. And then pull up a bit more with EQ. Here we go. Let's listen together. We can probably pull up a little bit. Here we go. And the other thing I'm seeing is like here, we have this thing. This is more like a background, a bit less volume sound. It doesn't need to be transient, right? Clip that transient, same thing. For the percussions, I feel the same. They are very transient. For the drums, clipping is oftentimes better option because it also makes them a bit more distorted and helps them cut through the mix as well. Finally, I'm gonna do the same horn. Now we have this. We have no effects whatsoever, but the drums already feels like they belong to each other. But there is still one more trick that we can do. Let's take this open hat and really make it super flat. So adding a clipper, shaving it off, you see, super flat. So when you start clipping with the drums, you may sometimes lose a bit of like transientness, attackiness of everything. What you can do, group them together and then use a compressor that you like. Depending on the attack that you are giving, you will provide kind of a transient. So in this case, if you go fast, you will have smaller transient. If you have slow, you will have a bigger transient. So let's take something like this and use fast release so it drops back very fast. Look what happens to our sausage now. You see this small thing? And if you bring the attack down, again, this is a very fast compressor, so even the slow settings will not increase it that much. I can exaggerate a bit so you can see a bit more, right? This is slow settings and this is fastest settings. So like I said, this is the fast compressor. We can take another example. So the fast settings, we are getting kind of similar, to the slower, and then slow. You see how it starts to disappear. So it reacts much slower. I would actually not suggest doing it by looking at it. I would suggest doing with the ear. And depending on how much you are doing it, like how much compressing, effect will be obvious. Again, if I illustrate, tiny amount or big amount, and what is your threshold, right? Now we are going all the way. Something like this should be kind of possible to hear for a casual producers. Just gonna turn this off and go to the group. We do this in the group, right? I'm not really going for more than 3 dB, so it's again small in the end. And all together now we have this. Remember, you didn't add many effects and it's already sounding pretty glued. But we have a last point where real things come together and probably the biggest contributor to make drums glued. We are going to come that in a second, but now let's take a look at the effect of the harmonics to make drums sound glued. Harmonics are the building blocks of a sound timbre. Adding or removing specific harmonics can transform one sound into another. When it comes to the drums, finding sounds with similar harmonic characteristics helps them blend well. But even in the case of sounds being different, you can actually add same type of upper harmonics to make them coherent. Let me show you how in the DAW. If the video is helping you, please consider like and subscribe. It really keeps me motivated making more videos like this. It doesn't matter how different your sounds are, you can still add the similar harmonics by grouping them up and using a distortion on top of everything, or using in a parallel form. Many distortion plugins let you mix on the go, so you don't need to create a parallel chain to do this. So what I'm going to do, just pick the things that I'm going to add distortion. The one thing that you should be careful, if you have a very rich sound like this, adding distortion can really mud the things because you have a lot of sound and you are getting even more harmonic sound. So what I'm going to do, actually pick the sound that I want to be kind of distorting together. And for that case, I will most likely go this like a hat, snare, hat, work, open hat. So what we are going to do, group them up. The plugin that you are going to use depends on what you are going for. I like a bit more warmer type of sounds, and I like the plugins that let me do wet dry on the go so that I don't need to create another chain and then do a parallel chain myself. The very classic one, very used one will be something like Walter Culture or something like Black Box Analog Design. There's a stereo version, we're just going to go for simple, not overcomplicate things. So the main idea is distort the sound, get the glue by making them sound similar. The more you distortion, the more you basically are pushing the gaining to the certain distortion algorithms. That means that the loudness goes up and up. You have to pull down a little bit here as well. To be honest, like I said, you can parallel process, which means that here, clean, wet, right? Feel like this is actually kind of sounding nice, and I don't even maybe consider actually parallel processing to use it the way it is. This is too much. The one side effect of using this amount of distortion could be bringing down the transceiver. You can clearly see what's going on, right? All those like a snappy transients kind of squash together and fatten up. We used quite a bit of distortion. The less you use, you see these like changes, like it is thinning up and the things come closer together. To kind of avoid that, actually, you can use mix buttons, distort a bit more, and then bring down the mix. And we see we are keeping the peak more or less the same. So together now we have this. Can now pull distortion group a bit more than. This is a subtle way of doing this. There's also a more aggressive in your face way of doing this. That one actually requires a return track or another parallel track so that you can actually really experiment there. Maybe your compression, they will call it parallel compression, and distortion, they will call it. Don't do both of them probably, because otherwise it will get too dirty. So I'm going to remove these two now. Again, pick the ones that you don't want to really get too much mud, like these two very long ones. I think I will avoid. And for the return, any distortion is fine. This time, let's go for the culture. Now what you want, send that distortion group here now. Don't play with the send amount later on. We're going to instead play with the return amount here, alright? Because the amount will affect the distortion and compression amount. Now we're going to really smash it up. I like to do it until I really hear there's that very distorted, like this, like really in your face sound. And then you can even like use glue compression, or maybe take something like FET. And then you can take like pull tech, you can use a similar EQ, but I'm just using fancy stuff like the pros do it, right? You can use the EQ8 here as well. Boosting and alternating, it creates weird. You can do actually more here. You can use one more distortion, one more glue compression. This part is really quite up to you. I have a more detailed explanation of this. I'm going to put the video over here, but we're going to keep it cool and smooth now. So we have this very distorted sound, and then what you do, solo this, bring this down to the 0 and start bringing it. That. Keep in mind, again, we are actually boosting the sound a bit. And all together now. Again, it's a tasting. If you are going for techno, aggressive house tracks, parallel distortion like this, New York compression could be very helpful. If you are going for more subtle genres that doesn't require this much, then you can just simply go for simple distortion like this, and it will be more than enough. Drums can be confusing, and I have a whole video about how to mix them. Take a look at here if you want to see it. This is the most important part of gluing drums. Creating a sense of shared space is crucial for making drums sound cohesive. Using delays and reverb strategically can place your drums in a unified acoustic environment. Let's see this in action. The first one was kind of important, second was subtle, but this, if you get it right, you're gonna make your drums glued every single time. As long as you're not outside, any sound that happens around us has the room. That means that you have to replicate it inside your DAW to get that glued feeling on your drums. Every producer is different. I'm a more like a plate or spring into a room reverb type of person with a delay. Gives a bit more tighter drums, which I really enjoy. But if you want to open up the drums, you can use, for example, whole reverbs, chamber reverbs, bigger shimmers, and so on and so forth. But let me show you. The first thing, I always start with plate. The reason being, my plates will be very tight, small, and kind of bright. That means that I can prioritize the things that I want to feel tight and send my sounds there. And I will almost never use in the channels, because if you put your reverbs on each channel, the adjustment process of each channel will be horrible for you. Using returns will make your life easier, and this is one of the biggest mistakes for the beginners or intermediate producers. So plate, any plate will do. I'm gonna use Artorias plate reverb because I really like it. I think it sounds very nice. So what we are going to do, I always test the plate reverbs on a snare. If it sounds good, it sounds good everywhere. This is too big, like huge. So what I like to bring the width down, make it all wet, bring down the size and drive. This is quite tight reverb, like this is bigger. There's the reason that I'm using like 3 in the middle, very in your face. Let me show you one other trick that I always use. It's my secret trick. It requires a specific plugin or specific type of distortion. I'm gonna use for also an exciter. And then on the exciter mode, there's a retro version. Turn off overdub sampling, and if you go retro, this will kind of make the sound older and open up the stereo a bit more. Listen together with everything. How beautiful is this plate reverb together with that ozone retro? It's just amazing. And now you can decide, is there a sound that I also want to enjoy this kind of tight, small plate reverb in my mix? I can consider maybe clicks, like that. It's a really beautiful reverb. Now without, I'm not trying to get whole room effect from my plate reverb. Only purpose is like get this tight tail, instant reverberation from my important elements. Once you have done that, you need to put everything inside the room. I'm gonna use Pro R2 because it's visual, so that I can show you what I'm doing. You can use anything that you want. So send now the group there just to test the reverb again, like our distortion group, these guys. Right into there. Solo here. And we're going to pick something like a probably medium room. Of course, we need to make it 100%. Right? Do you see how we feel the room now? It is there. I bring the distance a bit closer. Drive it a bit more. Let's play with the character. Make it a bit more vintage. Bring down the width. I don't want it too dark, though, neither too bright, because I have my plate already for the more brighter parts. When you are adjusting pre-delay, play together with your sound so you can hear how much delay you are feeling. Very cool. Now, what I'm going to do now, clean the zero, because I want individual elements especially. Send a bit here, like a very small amount. And then you can send individual elements that you want to emphasize a bit more with the room, which could be in this case, for me, percussion for sure. So you see, the percussions are really sparsely used, so we are not drowning in a reverb, so using it a bit smarter way. Then I can use, okay, my horns already have kind of room in it, but just the glue, sand it a bit there. Maybe a bit of this one as well. Without. With. Beautiful, beautiful. You can actually stop here, but if you want to get this little bit extra, even more room feeling, I will suggest actually using a slap delays, like very fast delays can help you like this initial echo in a room. You don't need to use in every single element. 100%, I'm gonna actually take off the filter to just avoid phasing issues. So take this one, yeah. Let's send it, let's solo that, remove the sync, bring down the feedback so we want short. You can use like this. play the hi-hat. And then, of course, we don't want this much. Do you hear how it opens? Now we can, of course, play around. If you use slap reverbs on long sounds, it can actually collapse on each other because the other sound is still playing and create this kind of weird phasey sound. Some people like it. I'm not a big fan of it, so this is the reason that I'm using it on shorter sound to avoid that issue. This is still too much for me. I like barely feel it, like first echo. Right? Let's use it on the snare as well. That, now I start to hear. And if you want to go even 1 mile extra, you can actually use a delay on clave, the longer reverb, just to make it more playful, but it's up to you. These are more colorful things. Also keep in mind, this is actually slightly better than I used to do, just because I want you to understand or hear all the effects. If you need really good drum samples that is not drowning in effects, I recorded best analog drum machines in a big sample pack, and I processed them personally so that you can just drop down in your project and use it on the go. And they will sound great. You can find my Debian analog drums on the description below.